Okay. All right. So I'm just going to put a note here in Facebook. And if you guys want to open it, it should, let's see, it should work now. It's just going to take a couple minutes for it to start up here. Thanks for rescheduling, guys. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
Yeah, it was just, I got back from Badwater. I was home for like, I got home at like 8 at night, and then we found out that he had passed away earlier in the week. Well, just found out when I was gone, and then we found out that the service was on Tuesday, so I was literally home for like 12 hours, and then we drove 8 hours to Buffalo, and then 12 hours to the Upper Peninsula.
Oh my gosh.
It was like it was just a long time, so I appreciate it. And if you guys want to, okay, so it actually works now, so people will be able to see it. I need to set it so that there's, let's see here. I just need to set a couple things up, and then we'll get rolling. So I'm just going to put it on. Yeah, baby. You're welcome, sweetie. I love you. Good night. Okay. Yeah, Gary just said send us a message. We're live, so I know we're live. I'm just trying to take a couple things off here and make sure that the group chat and stuff is working, which it should be. Let's see here. Alright, guys. Give me one more second, and then we'll get ready to roll. Okay, I will turn. Alright. Oh, that's what we want, control room. Public view with comments. Okay. All right, are you guys ready? Dina and Glenn? Dina, are you ready?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so we've been live for a while, and that's fine. I've just been leaving it. I will turn my video off so that I don't jump, so that the bandwidth's a little bit better. But thanks for everyone for coming and watching again. Thanks for everyone for dealing with the reschedule. Like I said in the group, Jess had a death in the family unexpectedly, and we had to go up, and we were up in Michigan, where we get, I think, worse internet signal than Dina. It's pretty much non-existent, and they had a bunch of storms, and it blew the satellite and stuff, so we didn't really have any service of it all kinds. So thanks for everyone for rescheduling. So we're going to jump into it, and today we're going to talk about more about the race day nutrition and training nutrition and that. So last time we touched base a lot on the kind of nutrition as a holistic thing and what we should do on their day-to-day stuff. And this is, we're going to talk specifically about race day nutrition and training nutrition. Thanks, Dina, again for coming along and spending time with us. I know I appreciate it, and Glenn appreciates it, and the whole team appreciates it. So let's kind of jump right in, and I'll start. So we talked last time, obviously, about nutrition kind of as a holistic thing, like I just mentioned, and now we want to talk about it as it pertains to training. So let's just kind of jump right into it. So I'm going to go out, and I'm going to go out and do my run today, or my cycle, some sort of aerobic effort. Before I go out and I start to work out, what are some of the things I should think about in terms of nutrition for that workout, even before I step out the door?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so some of it will depend what time of day you're going out. If it's in the morning, you can, and if your training session is going to be aerobic, you can easily, just hop out of bed, drink some water, and
or my cycling.
do your aerobic run or whatever it is without any nutrition. But if it is going to be
What are
maybe
some of the things I should think about in terms of nutrition?
that you think of that has had issues, or if there's someone listening right now with a specific question like that, it's good to hear the details and then work through those scenarios.
Okay, Dina, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can.
Yeah, it kind of cut out a little bit when you were starting to get in recap, but could you do it for us?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Did I cut out pretty soon?
Yeah, I cut out pretty soon into it, so let's go ahead and if you could
Okay.
kind of recap, that'd be awesome. We hear you perfect now.
Well, hey, then I can just change my answer.
There you go.
I'm just kidding. Well, no, I kind of end.
Keeps doing it.
Hey, Ryan, are you there?
Yep,
Okay.
I gotcha. Okay.
Okay. So, aerobic sessions somewhat depends on time of day that we're looking at, how long that session is going to be. Running versus biking, there's different muscle recruitment and so different energy expenditure. Obviously with running, the intensity, just as far as the movement goes with running versus being sitting on a bike. So there's, those kind of considerations. And then looking at the type of food we want to have beforehand. I wouldn't necessarily recommend a stick of butter for most people. So some of that will depend on the actual status of that athlete, whether they're efficient at using fat as a fuel source or they're more carbohydrate dependent. That will dictate the type of pre-workout snack or meal that should be consumed.
Gotcha.
A lot of variables.
Yeah, for sure. And I know there's no real answer in nutrition. There's no real easy answer in training either. So what are some, if you are going out and you're doing like more of an aerobic, like let's say, an hour run or an hour and a half run, kind of what are you looking for if you're doing more of an aerobic effort? Let's just say a run, because I mean, we do train some triathletes, obviously, but most of the people here are runners. So are you looking for carbs or protein or what are you looking for?
I would generally recommend a little bit of everything. So, and not to get too detailed or specific with amounts, but I would say the focus would be finding a carbohydrate source. But that could be a piece of fruit, or for the dairy eaters, that might be a little bit of yogurt. I have other runners that actually will consume a little avocado because that has fat and carbohydrate.
Mm-hmm.
For the fruit lovers, though, I would recommend just adding a touch of protein or fat with that source of fruit, just to level out a bit of the blood sugar spike that can occur by having the fruit with it by itself. So and plus that little bit of protein or fat, which could be as simple as a tablespoon of peanut butter or almond butter. It just provides a little bit more sticking power or,
Mhm.
fullness in the stomach and tends to last a little bit longer. So it doesn't need to be a huge, 60-gram carbohydrate type of, bar or a big old bagel necessarily. So again, that will depend on what kind of athlete we're looking at and what their daily nutrition patterns consist of.
Yeah, for sure. And what about some, some, like I know products like Gen Can and that. So what about people taking it in kind of in I don't say in liquid form instead of eating something? Are there benefits to actually consuming something like, I would say by mouth, but by, like eating eggs or eating something like that, or by liquid? Are there pros and cons to both, or if you're getting it in a liquid form, is that just as valid?
Yeah, it can be just as valid. So that's a good point too. Liquid nutrition will be digested more quickly in general. So solid versus liquid, that liquid passes through the stomach more easily, more quickly. But then what's in the liquid matters.
Okay.
So yeah, like the Gen the super starch that comprises that product or that food product is very quickly digested due to the nature of the molecular chain length and the molecular weight of that superstarch. But if we were to make, let's say, a smoothie that had a lot of fat in it, maybe coconut milk and peanut butter and just a whole bunch of fat loaded up in, but it was liquid form, that fat would still sit a little bit longer in the stomach. So that may not be the best thing for someone who's not used to higher fat um, snacks or just higher fat nutrition, period.
Okay, so we've kind of figured out what we want to take in, roughly before we go out and work out. And I know it's a lot for a lot of people too. It can be trial and error in terms of, it might seem like that we want to take in something, but maybe our GI system just can't handle it. And for some people, it's, for certain things they have more of a touchy stomach. So I know it's an important, and we talk to this for all of our runners too, that they need to test what they're doing. Test going out and taking in whatever you want to take in, and then doing a marathon effort, because you never know if you're not going out and really working, at the level that you're going to do, when you're racing or when you're training. Then something might sit easy when you're going out and doing a half-hour bike ride in lieu of doing like 8x10 8x10 minute sprints on the bike or whatever the case is. So understanding how it deals with your GI system is important too.
Yeah, and really good point you just made there that I just want to reiterate, Ryan, is practicing that nutrition at what your goal pace is for your upcoming race, because a lot of athletes forget about that part, and especially if the coach isn't reminding them like this is a really important quality session for you. You have some race pace efforts, or you've got a 45-minute race pace effort here. Definitely thinking about practicing that nutrition during that training session, but also what you're doing beforehand, and even considering the night before if you're knocking out that session early in the morning, just like with races that start at 6 or 7 a.m. What we consume that night before or within that 12 to 24-hour window prior can really affect how we feel and what that gut feels that next morning.
Yeah, definitely. I know we've all experienced that where we've tried to take in something, and that's why we say, and everyone listening, make sure that you're trying everything, at a race pace effort. So one thing that I want to touch on, and I think it's important to interject it here, is talking, I guess, a little bit about metabolic efficiency. And a lot of people are here, and it's you are obviously an expert on this topic, and working with Bob and that, and we're hearing a lot about it now. If you're reading Competitor, even Runner's World, it's all talking about, fat for fuel and, burning fat instead of carbohydrates or whatever. So I know you could talk about this topic and probably teach a course on it for,
Mhm.
15 weeks, but is there any way you can kind of give us, and it doesn't even have to necessarily be about metabolic efficiency specifically, but kind of this fat for fuel thing, and kind of explain what it is and why it's important, or why it matters, I guess, or why people are talking about it.
Yes. Okay, so in a nutshell, metabolic efficiency is defined as how efficient is your body at burning fat or using fat during exercise or even during your everyday activities while preserving carbohydrate stores. And why that's important, or why it's a hot topic, is because we're seeing, I mean, this is some basic physiology here and biochemistry things at work, but generally our bodies have in the range of 50,000 upwards of 80,000 calories worth of stored fat to use as an energy source versus carbohydrate stores, which can be 1,500 to 2,000 calories worth. So much, a very dramatic difference there in that energy pool
That's
that we
crazy.
can pull from.
I mean, that's so much. That's just an incredible number. So how is and so I know that so then essentially when you're out training, you're burning or you're using a combination of, I guess, carbohydrate and fat. Is that correct? And what we want to do is try to see as efficiently as we can to use fat more than using that carbohydrate, because we have a limited amount of carbohydrate that we have we have at our disposal, essentially.
That's right. When I put people on the metabolic cart and have them run on the treadmill at different paces, we're never really exclusively burning carb or fat unless we're going, we would burn only carbohydrate if you're at an all-out maximum effort, which, we can only do for a very short period of time. So we are using a mixture of fuels, which not so much protein, but definitely a mix of carbohydrate and fat. But the goal with improving metabolic efficiency is, yes, to convert or improve those metabolic systems, all the things happening in your body during exercise, so that when you are running, let's say even at your aerobic pace, you're just more efficient at bringing in or converting your fat stores to that immediate fuel source, because it is more of an unlimited supply than the carbohydrate pool that we have. And then that affects what we do with our training nutrition, because if we can burn more fat at aerobic paces or even pushing up into higher intensity, faster paces, then we don't need to do as much in the way of training nutrition or as much in the way of supplemental carbohydrates during our training sessions and even during our races.
So how does one improve this? So how do you actually, become more fat adapted or efficient at doing it? What is kind of the, are you not eating before you go out, or are you eating, fats, or how can I be better at doing that?
Yeah, good one. There are a number of strategies that can be implemented, but honestly, it all comes down to first targeting what you're doing with your everyday nutrition. So for a lot of athletes, that means overhauling their breakfast, lunch, dinner to be more controlled in terms of carbohydrate intake. Typically, endurance athletes aren't consuming nearly enough in the way of fats and proteins. So what we're doing is trying to balance blood sugar through food choices, because that balancing of blood sugar and that whole insulin thing that we talked about last time. Mm-hmm. So really important for making enzymatic or cellular changes that enhance our body's ability to burn fat.
Okay.
So what we do with, the meals that we eat, there are a lot of things happening inside the body that we don't even realize, just with improving the mitochondria. Mitochondria are those little parts of the cell that produce energy, or ATP. the little
Hey, Dina, can you hear me? I think we dropped you a little bit again. Don't worry, everyone. She usually comes back.
that or
There we go.
yeah, yeah, sorry.
No, you're fine.
I'm
So you
cutting
were
out.
saying you were talking about ATP and then you cut out right after that.
Yeah, well, the fact is that what we do with our meal choices can really influence what's going on at the cellular level.
Okay.
And so it's just something that a lot of us don't realize. We think it's just immediate food for that quick energy source, or, there's not much going on other than our stomach works to
Hmm.
digest the food, and we, gain benefit from that, from the vitamins and minerals and protein and all that. But there are a lot of things happening at the cellular level that can enhance that level of metabolic efficiency.
Interesting. So it's something that's really becoming more and more, I guess, prevalent. You're starting to see a lot of people writing about it and that. And I'm sure, are you seeing more athletes come to you and looking, to deal, looking to kind of take advantage of this, so to say, or being tested like on the cart? I know I listened to Endurance Planet podcast, and I know that you tested. I'm pretty sure you tested them like Tawny, and I don't know if you tested Lucho or not, but that a lot of more people are talking about it now. Oh, it looks like, hold on. It looks like Dina dropped off a second. I'm sure she'll be back on. Oh, there she is. Dina, are you back?
Yes.
So I was just saying, are you seeing a lot more athletes come to you now and looking to deal with it? I know I listened to Endurance Planet podcast, and I know Tawny. I think you did Tawny and Lucho. You did their metabolic fit. You did like a card on them. But how are you seeing it kind of be implemented, I guess, more in athletes' everyday training?
So usually it's an athlete that is with fueling. So during, let's say, marathons or anything ultra distance, for runners, I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So they've had troubles just trying to figure out what sort of nutrition they can tolerate because they've had stomach problems, or they've bonked, or they just cannot get it right. Or they've had some health scares like, oh my gosh, my doctor told me I have pre-diabetes, or I'm at risk for, heart disease, and I really need to get this figured out. The best thing we can do is put you on the metabolic cart and see what's happening, because the metabolic cart is measuring your oxygen, carbon dioxide use. It's hard data. I mean, this is not, there's nothing that can be falsified when we put you on the metabolic cart. It shows a true picture of what's going on with your fat and carbohydrate use, how many calories you're burning at different intensities. So we can use that to see not only for performance, changing nutrition to support better training and performance outcomes, but we can see, the effect of exercise, what's going on. If you are a high carb burner, obviously there are some health implications there long term. And so that cart is kind of like getting your blood work done. It's a good baseline. It tells us what we need to do and how dramatic the changes need to be to make some positive changes for athletic outcomes and health outcomes.
And if people are interested in getting it done, is there kind of a list of people that do it, or is it a service that's pretty readily offered in most places? I know some people might want to actually go have it done and see what happens.
Yeah, we have a list of some certified um, health professionals that offer the testing. Of course, I do it here in Denver for anyone that's in the area, but a lot of performance centers at the universities will offer this kind of testing. So it's something I would be happy to help someone if they're interested in finding out where they could get tested.
Great. Okay, so for someone that isn't necessarily maybe focused on metabolic efficiency, I guess let's go back to, I don't want to say an everyday runner, but someone that's, going out and they're training and they need to take in that, they need to take in some sort of calories during their run. Or actually, let me step back. So I'm going out and I'm doing my run. What's actually happening to my body that needs me to take in calories, or why is it important to take in calories, or do I have to take in calories?
Good one. Good question. So I think that will depend who you are and if you have goals such as fat loss or body composition changes, and then again what kind of workout it is you're doing. But I mean, there are a lot of there are different energy systems that come into play when we start to do our exercise. So if it's more of an aerobic type workout, then the ideal is that our bodies should start burning fat, and so you've got a process there within the body that starts to break down fats and use those as energy sources. If it's a high intensity run, then there's a different energy system that goes to work to convert again those carbohydrates to that usable energy source, which is that ATP. That's the term or the abbreviation for that little energy unit that all of us are producing. Even just sitting here listening, we're all producing some ATP. Otherwise, we wouldn't be functioning.
Yeah, and so if I'm going to go out, let's say, and you mentioned for fat loss, so let's just kind of throw that as an example. So if someone's trying to go out and say they're focusing on fat loss as a goal for them in training, so should they be focusing on not taking in calories?
Not necessarily. Again,
it matters on the person.
It does matter, yeah.
It matters so much on the individual person, and I hope that everyone understands that. And if they have questions, go to Dina or consider working one-on-one with Dina or working with her or having a conversation, because it's just like training. So we try to ask as many pointed questions as we can, but it's so individual.
Yeah, but I mean, in general, shorter workouts that are going to be easier, like a recovery run, we don't necessarily need to fuel for that workout or replace the calories that we burn from that workout. So I wouldn't be too concerned. Now, if it's someone who's underweight or trying to gain some body mass, then that's a different story.
Okay.
But the majority of athletes I see, and runners in particular, we want to be as lean as possible. And so I see a lot of runners who look at the data that the Garmin spits out, or the Training Peaks that says you burned 600 calories, and then they think, oh, I need to replace those calories because I burned so many. Right, and so then they think they need to eat, a big meal after that run, but it's not necessarily the case. Of course, what we pick to eat can influence that level of metabolic efficiency.
Okay, so let's say that we are someone that's going to fuel. Let's say we're doing a longer distance, we're doing a marathon, or like you were doing Leadville, or we're doing kind of a long distance event, and we're looking to fuel. It seems like I'm using these qualifiers. There are a ton of different options to fuel with. I sell them at Marathon Sports where I work. I mean, there's Genucan on the run, and there's Tailwind, like people that Gary use, and then there's Goo and Cliff Bar and Cliff Shot. So there's essentially all of the manufactured stuff, whether you take it as a goo or whether you take it as a liquid. And then there's also people that fuel with eating like real food. So what are, I guess, are there pros and cons, aside from the fact that my stomach doesn't like when I drink Genucan, but it likes when I eat something, aside from personal things, are there pros and cons to taking in something in like a liquid form, or eating something pre-prepared like a goo or a Cliff Shot or something, or like real food? So should we be looking to do one or the other? Are there benefits of not eating real food, or is real food better?
Well, we certainly see that we get more of that nutrient density or nutrition quality when we eat whole foods. And typically whole foods, I guess it varies, but whole foods might give us a little bit more of that carb, protein, fat mix. So, some ultra runners will eat, yeah, solid foods in addition to their liquid nutrition, because they're going to be out there for so many hours. There are even some marathoners that will eat bites of homemade bars or prepackaged nutrition bars or energy bars, whatever we want to call them. So yeah, of course, it depends on that individual and if they can tolerate that solid food. But benefit-wise, I think the benefit we do get from some of that solid food would be the extra nutrition bang. So like a little bit of that protein to keep you full, and the little bit of fat just to extend how long that food works for you. But for some of the runners who might have a pretty good clip, they're running fast paces. Heart rate might be up there in upper zone 3 or zone 4. Some of that solid food or whole food option may not be digested very well just because of the intensity at which they're running. And so that's where some of those simple sugar type foods like the shot blocks or gels might work better for that particular individual. So benefit-wise, digest much more quickly, and especially if that person is more carbohydrate dependent, they will benefit from that quick-acting carbohydrate source.
And for someone that is benefiting from that quick carbohydrate source, it's a carbohydrate source that you kind of have to keep feeding. Is that true? Or you have, if you're taking your benefit on that, you really have to keep feeding it and topping it off because there's that limited supply of it.
That's true, right. If we're not able to utilize fat at certain intensities or running paces, and we're using more carbohydrate at that given pace, at some point, yes, we burn out of those carbs. We take in some, let's say a gel. That gel gets used pretty darn quickly. It's 100 calories typically. So depending again on the individual and how fast they're running, how quickly they burn through that carbohydrate, they may need to replace that fuel every 20, 30 minutes. If it's someone, though, who's running a slower pace, they're still using simple sugars, however, not burning through that carbohydrate as quickly because they are at a lower intensity. They'll still need to refeed with that simple sugar source, but it may not be for another 45 minutes or an hour.
Great. One thing that I wanted to touch on before I kind of jump, I guess, to another topic is if you're going longer distance. So let's say, you're doing a 50 miler or 100 miler or a half Ironman or Ironman. Is it important to, as the race goes on, to start increasing? Should I start increasing carbohydrate or should I start taking in protein, or is there any sort of specific thing that I should be looking for to increase as the distance or duration of the race increases?
So yeah, I think for beyond the marathon duration, typical duration, I suppose, or distance, I think bringing in some proteins, which might actually be in the form of amino acids. So it's already broken down. Instead of taking in like a piece of salami, for example, or bacon, you take the amino acids. So that's the elements of the proteins, which could be in powder form or capsule form. And your muscles take that up much more easily, and it's easier on the stomach. I think that is something that's pretty important for ultra distance runners. But you don't necessarily need to wait, until you're halfway through a 50K or 50 miler. You can start that sooner in the distance and still benefit greatly. And then I think fats, that's all over the place because that still does depend on the individual.
Okay.
And how long they're anticipated to be out there. So if it's a 10-hour race, we just naturally get hungry.
Yeah.
Most of us do anyway. So we may want to do little bits of solid food like that protein, fat, carb combo, which could be, the whole food option or the prepackaged option.
Sure.
But splitting that up into, a little bit every hour, every couple hours. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. So we've talked about all this food. Yeah, go ahead, Glenn.
I just wanted to interject a little bit because Dina and I kind of talked about this a little bit yesterday, is you've also got to be mindful as an athlete in those longer events like marathon and beyond that you might not feel hungry, but you got to get your nutrition.
Mm.
Right, yeah, Dina? It's true. Yeah, I mean, some athletes, I don't know if there's anyone listening that can attest to this, but, you can actually lose your appetite or just being forgetful, if you haven't memorized your plan or you don't have a pacer or someone running with you to remind you. And especially for those longer distances, if you go without nutrition for 3-4 hours, even hydration, I mean, you can get yourself in a hole. And then depending on what that course looks like or that race, terrain, altitude, environmental conditions like the humidity, temperature, and all that, you really have to be prepared and keep nutrition and hydration on the mind.
Yeah, and so I want to transition into that because you exactly said it. So let's talk a little bit about hydration and kind of some, I guess, rules of thumb or some guidelines you could possibly give for hydration, because I know you look at guidelines that say drink 20 ounces or 12 ounces every 15 minutes or this or that or the other thing. So what are some things you really have to focus on with hydration, or what we should be mindful of?
And the rules for that are certainly changing. I mean, you've got now that school of thought that says drink to thirst,
mm-hmm.
and don't drink ahead of thirst. That's kind of going out the window now for various reasons. But I think it does depend where you live, what kind of race you're training for. I mean, if you live in a cooler climate and you're training for a race that's going to be in a hotter, more humid climate than what you're used to, then you need to simulate some of those conditions, just like what Chris did with bad water training. Yep. Running in the heat of the day or putting extra layers on, and then bringing in your hydration strategies. But sometimes it can get hard to figure out when you're thirsty. If you live in cooler places or you train in the early morning of the day, you're not, you're just not thirsty yet. So there's where we can look at, like, well, pay attention to your urine color, or did you pee at all during your training, your training run? How often do you pee during the day? Things like that, that can help us dictate or determine, okay, yes, you actually need to take in around 8-10 ounces of water per hour, or maybe for you it is more if you're a big person and a fast runner. So you do have to look at that whole individual, and then what kind of race or event they're training for, and then just how well daily hydration practice is. And actually, nutrition choices can influence hydration as well. For high sodium people, we may need to, give you a little bit more in the way of fluids, and consider electrolytes as well.
And what about drinking hydration in terms of other things? So I know Shay asked a question about coconut water and other types of, there's coconut water and obviously Gatorade and those types of different types of liquids you can take in. Should we be looking at just water or other things like coconut water to try to replenish electrolytes or other things that do we need to worry about that?
Yeah, and now the big thing seems to be tailwind.
Yeah, well, this is a big topic too, right, with electrolytes. I personally think coconut water is overused, and coconut water is really a potassium source, and we don't lose that much potassium when we sweat. We lose sodium.
Okay.
So I'm not one to recommend coconut water during exercise, unless it's a very long training session, and we put some sodium with it.
And so let's talk about electrolytes really quick. So is taking in something like, S-caps or Endurolites or that, is that important as part of our, strategy as we're looking to, take in what we need to take in to have a successful event?
So this is one of those it depends answers.
Yep.
Right? So yeah, I mean, so for people who do have high sodium, high levels of sodium in their food choices, so if they're eating out quite a bit or eating frozen foods that might have preservatives, they eat a lot of salty snacks, things like pretzels and chips, salami, pepperoni, deli meats. So high sodium daily diets, typically we need to supplement with some electrolytes during, I would say, training sessions that are over an hour and a half. It's a good idea. Or if you're in the heat of the day and you're just a really heavy sweater, because you're taking in a lot of sodium in your daily nutrition, you're exercising in the heat. If you're a heavy sweater, you're losing a lot of sodium through your sweat. So for those individuals, I would say, yeah, an electrolyte makes sense. However, what is the electrolyte source? I know a lot of people think coconut water is the thing, but that's potassium more so than anything else, and that's not what you're losing so much of in your sweat.
So something like a salt stick or something along those lines?
Salt stick, yeah. You mentioned S-caps, Endurolites, so those are all capsules without the added sugars. So they're providing that just pure electrolyte source, those minerals that we're losing in our sweat: sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium, little bit of chloride. And so that is a great option, especially for people who have weight loss goals. And we look at their training nutrition and they're taking in, 16 ounces of Gatorade or Ironman Perform drink or any of those kinds of electrolyte, quote unquote, electrolyte drinks. They have quite a bit of sugar that we really may not need. So we can switch over to those electrolyte capsules or things like the Noon tablets or the Guru tablets, and still get that quality electrolyte source, but without all the added sugar.
Yeah, and that's really what we talked about in the last one, that sugar is really one of the things that we want to, we don't want to avoid it, if we need it in terms of functioning for a race, but that we don't want to take in too much of or overtake in, and it's in a lot of the drinks and that stuff. So to be mindful of taking that in.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we went out, we've completed our event, now we get home. All right, now I have to worry about, what am I doing when I get home? So, we've come home from, let's say, we've went out for, our run, and let's say it was a pretty decent effort. I mean, we weren't out running for, 10 minutes and that was it, but we went out and we put in, a good effort, a good solid training run. What are we looking at when we're coming home? Should we be looking at eating right away or taking something right away, or in terms of the nutrition side, not, we want them to foam roll and stretch out and stuff like that, but in terms of nutrition, what should I be looking to do when I get home or when I'm done with my workout?
Right. I think if it's an aerobic run that's in that under 90 minutes or so, we don't necessarily need to replenish right away. If you know, though, that you're not going to eat a meal for another 3 or 4 hours, or you don't have that opportunity, then I think it makes sense to eat something. Again, I would vote for looking at balanced snack, and I know that word's overused when it comes to nutrition, but something that does have your protein, fat, and a little carbohydrate. So that could be, again, if you want me to give a few examples, that could
Sure.
be yogurt with nuts and fruit. It could be a smoothie. It doesn't have to be a huge, gourmet meal or anything. It can be, chicken with some veggie and, thrown in a little rice or something that's appropriate if you're not going to be able to eat anything for a number of hours. For those, though, that do have weight loss goals, I'd say you do want to look at what you're eating post-workout, because it may be more than what you need. And a lot of athletes will eat a recovery meal and then 1-2 hours later eat again, even though their run is only an hour. So we might be overdoing it slightly with nutrition.
And that's kind of one of the things we want to think about in
Go
general, though, right? Is, we run to eat or whatever the case is. Like, we want to make sure that, be mindful of that. If you go out and you do a 60-minute run, it doesn't mean you can eat, an entire pizza that night, because, there's going to be there's definitely a balancing act that has to happen.
That's true. And with aerobic workouts, we're going to get plenty of nutrition throughout the day, given, I'm kind of assuming most people here are eating, regularly throughout the day, not skipping meals.
Mm-hmm.
But, you will get enough carbohydrate to replenish your glycogen stores. And if you eat proteins, you're going to get enough protein to repair muscle tissue and things like that. So you don't have to necessarily eat something within 30 minutes for aerobic sessions, even if they're an hour and a half, maybe even 2 hours. Again, that depends, on that individual and what kind of context we're looking at.
So let's say it was a harder session. Like a 5x5,
harder sessions
for like a 5x5, 5x5 minutes, at lactic threshold or something like that, or 7x5 minutes, and they put in a really hard effort.
I think if it's a hard effort, and especially if there's another workout schedule, like, I'm going to do an evening strength session, or I'm going to do a short 30-minute recovery bike or something later in the day, I think then that window of time, that 30-minute, is fairly important. And what we need to look at there in terms of makeup of that recovery nutrition, believe it or not, it's not that big of a meal or anything. Protein-wise, in the range of 10 to 25 grams of protein. 25 grams of protein is about the amount you find in a scoop of your typical protein powder, or that's about 3 eggs, which sounds like a lot, or it's about 3 ounces of turkey or any other meat. So that's that protein. That's the upper end, that 25 grams. 10 grams, we're talking an ounce and a half of turkey or ham or whatever meat you eat. Or about, a half scoop of protein powder. And a lot of nutrition bars, you can look right at the label if it's something you need quick. Look at that protein value, and you'll see whether or not it fits in that 10 to 25 gram target. And then a little bit of carbohydrate. So same range, I would say, for most people. 10 upwards of 30 grams of carbohydrate. And then fat's that moving target. If you know you're not going to eat for some number of hours, I think it's important to include some fat, just so that snack keeps you full.
Great.
If you know, okay, I'm having my recovery nutrition, but I know I'm going to lunch in, an hour and a half, then you don't have to add necessarily any fat. It's the protein and carbohydrate that are essential.
Yeah, and I think people seem to be avoiding the fat because they think that that's where it's coming from, but that's definitely an important part of, of replenishing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, for the double workouts, that's important. Or the other thing I was going to add is if you're doing an evening hard session and you know you've got to knock out a training session early morning the next day, that recovery nutrition is pretty important. But if you've got 24 hours between your two training workouts, you know, then not as critical.
Good. And that's interesting because, you know, everyone hears different things about taking it in, but you know, it's good to know that if we don't have that time to come home and, you know, we had an aerobic workout, we really can get a lot of the things that we need, you know, throughout our daily nutrition, as long as it's, you know, on par. One of the things I wanted to ask, I wanted to go to a question that was in there in the chat from Nicole. She was saying foods or supplements that are good for tendons or support cartilage, especially people dealing with injuries. So I can kind of expand that topic. So what about nutrition for someone that's dealing with an injury? I don't want to say is it important to eat better than, but, you know, are there certain things that if someone's dealing with an injury, they could possibly look to be, you know, eating more of or taking in more that's going to help promote recovery?
You know, I would vote for definitely looking at fat sources than things like avocado or omega-3 sources of fat, which, I mean, you could get in capsule form or soft gel form, but walnuts, you know, your cold water fish, your salmon, tuna, those kinds of things. As far as injury recovery, you know, there's debate now as far as antioxidants. So that's like when you think of antioxidants, vitamin C, for example, because we want our body to be able to fight the inflammation somewhat on its own and not protect it too much. So, you know, we have to be careful there with overdoing it in terms of supplementation in the form of antioxidants and things that are seen as anti-inflammatory. But protein's obviously another option there for injury, and again, it depends on the type of injury as well. But protein does have good recovery action in the body and healing action, depending on, again, if it's a bone or, you know, if we're looking at soft tissue damage. So that's another important thing, not skimping too much on protein.
Great. Glenn, do you have any questions that you've been holding on to while I kind of look in the YouTube channel, or anything else to add?
No, I mean, everything she's hit on, we've talked about, and all the questions I've had have been answered. So she covers it pretty thoroughly.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so much to talk about, and so much to do, and so much of it is really individual, and so while we can learn a lot here, you know, Dina, what are maybe some resources that if people want to learn about maybe, you know, metabolic efficiency, or about, you know, training for, not training, you know, good nutrition habits for, you know, pre-race or during, you know, what are some resources that they might be able to read, or books that you might know off the top of your head? We certainly can take a listen, get some links from you afterwards, but any that you could think of, or sites or people to talk to, aside from, you know, including yourself, you know, any of those that you could recommend?
I mean, there's my colleague, of course, wrote the book on metabolic efficiency training that's available at the Fuel Formants website. For anyone who wants to learn more about that on their own, it's a good resource. And then as far as other sports nutrition, gosh, that's all over the place. There's a book called Performance Nutrition by Krista Austin. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much out there.
I know, there are so many resources.
And there's so many resources, and I just want to mention this to people that, you know, I have very strong feelings on trusting people, especially with nutrition, just like you guys trust us with training. And I trust Dina and respect Dina, and I know Glenn does as well, the work that she does and the amount of time that she puts into learning about all of these things and thinking critically about it. So don't just trust some guy on the internet that has a site that says that you should be doing this, because what's important is we don't train you to run. We don't train everyone the same way, and we don't train you how we train ourselves. And so, Dina has spent a lot of time learning about nutrition as a topic and as a career, and she understands how to tailor that to the individual. And I just hate seeing people being so dogmatic about doing it one way when that doesn't work for everyone else. So the resources that Dina mentioned, getting a good book that covers all the bases on nutrition, and then figuring out what works for you is really important.
Definitely, and that can take time.
Yeah, sure.
Time and patience, right, to figure it out.
Sure, and especially with making changes. I mean, sometimes you make a change and it's for the better, but it takes your body a while to really make that change and to feel good after making that change.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Glenn, do you have anything else, Glenn?
No, I'm good.
Yeah, I just popped into the chat, and it looks like that was really all of the main the main questions that we have. And again, it's something that we really have to experiment with ourselves. But Dina gave us a lot of good information here. Dina, do you have anything you want to maybe add or kind of close out with that you were thinking of as you were answering things, or you might have thought you wanted to throw in but you forgot?
Remember last time we ended our webinar with just that suggestion for keeping a log to monitor your daily nutrition. I think you can do this as well with your training. We often log, how many miles did I run and what was my average pace and my heart rate and all this stuff, and we forget to note for our coach or ourselves, like, what nutrition did I take in? That way, as you build for your important race of the year, or races, you can reflect on that. And, if things didn't feel well in your stomach, or you felt like you bonked, or it was just not happening, or you were extremely sweaty and it was unusual, all those things, you can just start noting those additional comments, because that's helpful not only for yourself, but for anyone who's monitoring that. Or if you do seek help from someone like me, then you've got all that information to collect and put together and use that to make some changes.
Yeah, that's awesome way to end on. I mean, always keeping track of things and logging it. If it helps you to log it in Training Peaks, you can log it in Training Peaks, obviously, so we can take a look at it, or just writing it down. But Dina, thank you so much for spending the hour with us and giving us so much information. I know some of the questions are difficult because they're so individually, so focused on an individual and what they need to do. But I really appreciate you taking the time to explain some of the concepts to us and give us that background that we can use to go out and see what works for ourselves and see what we need to do to become a better athlete. So thanks so much for taking the time.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for the opportunity.
Of course, and if you guys are here, and you're obviously in the Mouse to Go group, so you can ask Dina questions, but you can also email her. I know it's Dina@fuel, and then there's 4, and it's mints.com, but I'll make sure to put her email in the group as well if you guys have questions. But make sure to reach out and consider having a consultation with Dina, or even working with her for a couple months or an extended period of time, because nutrition is such an important thing, and she can help you not only with the day-to-day stuff but also the racing stuff as well. She's an invaluable resource, and the fact that she's here to share all of her information is so incredible to us, and something that we really appreciate it, and I don't take for granted. So thank you so much, Dina.
Thanks so much, Ryan.
No problem. Glenn, all right, guys, we're going to sign off for the night. Thanks for tuning in. This will be archived as well, and we always can go ahead and watch it. So, Dina, Glenn, stick around. I'll talk to you guys in a minute, but I'm going to go ahead and stop the broadcast. So thanks, everyone, for joining in, and have a great night.